I'm Merritt Ansa, and you're listening to the Devoted Dreamers Podcast, the podcast for dreamers, creators, and makers who are eager to wake up in the morning with the confidence to say, "This is who God made me, and this is the dream He's given me." If you have a dream on your heart, but you're confused about how to move forward, or fear, anxiety, and worry that you're not enough rules your days, if you're halted by comparison because someone else is already doing your dream, or you're struggling to believe there's anything God could ever use you for, welcome to Season 7. You're about to receive the encouragement you need to pursue that dream. Through the stories of women just like you who have faced their fears, fought back lies, taken bold steps, and are still in the middle of it. Stick around and you will be emboldened to take that next step. Grow in confidence in your identity in Christ. Become sure of His faithfulness in your life, and be inspired by the good He will fuel through you in the world. Because, sister, the victory is already yours. I want to let you in on a little insider scoop here about what's going on with the show. I am trying out something new in Season 7. By the way, welcome back. Happy New Year. I have missed you guys. But I won't say I didn't enjoy having a few weeks off from the intensity of podcast production and recording and all that goes along with that. And in case you missed it, I was off social media too for about 4 weeks. And boy, was that revealing. In fact, a little side note, if you've ever thought of doing something like this and need just a little push, I needed a little push because this was my first ever hiatus from social media other than like a very long plane ride or a mission trip overseas where I didn't have access to my phone. But here's why you should do it. It was literally week 3 of my detox when I noticed my brain beginning to benefit from it and function slightly differently as I started to have some new ideas percolating and popping up. Week 3, that ought to tell you something about what social media does to our brains. I mean, I'm back on now. Hope to see you there, but just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, I said I'm doing things a little differently this season, and that's because, especially for the new listener, but also for you too, if you've been around here for a while, I want to kick off my episodes with just a little sneak peek as to what you can expect from that particular show, which for this one, you'll hear in just a minute. But at the beginning of each show, I'm offering just that sneak peek and then a shorter closing following the interview or whatever the main portion of the episode is in case I'm doing a solo. And I'm finding that my interviews are tightening up a bit, closer to 30 or 40 minutes instead of 45 to an hour as they have been. I've switched my questions up a little bit. I'm kind of leaving it open for a little bit more flow. Somehow that's producing shorter interviews. But that said, it leaves me time at the end to just remind listeners, new listeners, regular listeners, to subscribe, to leave a review, to share the show with your friends, all the things. And I mention this because I want to know if you notice a difference and whether you like it or you don't. I would love to hear from you. So just let me know what you think. And my reason for doing this, well, it's because I've been doing it the other way for at least 2 seasons now. I had switched things up originally as I had a new baby. I wanted to try to save myself some time in recording and preparation, but I feel like it's good for the brain. There it is again, that whole brain topic. But good for the brain to change things up a bit and maybe provide myself with a little bit of discomfort instead of sticking with the same old habits just because they're habits. So think about how that might be something you could do with your dream or something that you do all the time the same way. Anyway, all that said, in this episode, here's your little sneak peek for episode 138. If your dream feels totally out of your league, like way bigger than anything you could ever do alone, you are going to love this one. We're going in for the reminder that God knows the path, that He shares little bits of it with us as necessary, and that we probably would be totally overwhelmed if He showed us the whole thing all at once. Isn't He so kind and merciful to operate that way? Anyway, Misty's story teaches us the importance of remembering God as our provider, always. Even when it seems we have been left to figure things out on our own, He is still there. Her story is such an encouragement that God can do anything with our meager offering. We just have to be willing participants. If you have ever dreamed of starting a podcast, or you have a podcast already and could use a learning opportunity and some encouragement from other Christian podcasters, you're going to want to stick around and hear about the giveaway she's offering. But even if you're not a podcaster, you're not going to want to miss this one. Okay, let's jump right in. Hello, devoted dreamers. It is so fun to say welcome to 2020 and season 7 of the Devoted Dreamers podcast. I'm super excited. I know I always say that, but I'm super excited to bring to you today this episode number 138 with Misty Phillip. So I have been just kind of watching and following Misty from afar for a little while, and we have finally connected to get to have this conversation and share it with you today. And I don't know about you, but if you are excited about podcasts like I'm excited about podcasts, I think you're going to love her dream, which is the creation of the Spark Christian Podcast Conference, which she is hosting in February. So just next month in Houston, Texas. And there's more about how you might be able to get a ticket later on in the show. So stay tuned for that. But Misty is also the host of the By His Grace podcast. So if you haven't ever listened to that, please go check it out. And Misty really just has a longing to create a community of Christian podcasters to spark conversations for God's kingdom. So Misty, welcome to the Devoted Dreamers podcast.
Thank you so much, Merritt. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
So fun. And I mean, we just literally chatted for 30 minutes before. I always think I probably should have just hit record. We were having such a good conversation. But anyway, it's really fun to have you. I'm super thrilled that you have this passion to gather Christian podcasters, because when I started this, 3.5 years ago, I was like, where is the gathering place for the Christian podcasters? And I really could not find it. There was not one central spot where those of us who are doing this were hanging out. So you're gathering them all in Houston in February. Talk a little bit about this dream and how it came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to start with, I wanted a place exactly that. There wasn't a place for Christian podcasters. I'd been talking to people who had gone to the major podcasting conferences. There are secular conferences that are very large, and there would be pockets of Christians, and they would sort of congregate towards one another. And, but it was a handful of people. And then on the other side of that, I had been to some amazing writing and blogging and speaking conferences. And some of those now are adding a podcast, speaker where they will talk about podcasting, or they'll have a podcast track. But there was nothing that sort of married the two of those things together, the best of what the podcasting world has to offer, and a place for Christians to come together to spark conversations. And so the Lord gave me that dream. It was really an answer to a prayer. I had another project that I was working on, and that project was frustrating me, and it wasn't going the way I wanted to. And after my husband came to me with a hard pill to swallow, I knew he was right. And I took it all to the Lord, and I just said, Lord, my season of life, my gifting, my calling, all that is on my plate. You created me for good works and for a purpose. And I really want to follow you and to do that. I love this podcasting thing. I want to make this better. I saw the influence that my small podcast was having, where I'm reaching people all over the world, which that was just so amazing to me. And I was like, what if we got all of these people together who are Christians? How much more impact can we have for the kingdom if we're working and collaborating together and, sharing from the mistakes that we've made to help to bring somebody along, to get them further down the road than we are? That was my dream.
It's incredible because this is like no small endeavor to start a podcast. And yet almost every week someone's like, I want to start a podcast. And it's like, yeah, but it is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
It's hard to do it by yourself. You need that like community of people to be like, oh yeah, I tried it this way and that was a total flop. So, go this other venue or whatever. So I'm so excited that you're doing this. And you said you've got a good number of folks signed up already. Why don't you tell us like details? Like when is it? Where is it? What can people expect if they wanted to come?
Yeah. So the conference is in Houston, Texas, in the northern suburbs. And so it's convenient to Intercontinental Airport, just so you know. It is February 21st and 22nd, which is a Friday and a Saturday. And we start at the crack of dawn. We start early Friday morning and we go all day into the evening with fun events sprinkled in with teaching and training and networking. And we're going to do some speed networking and some town hall where people get to ask questions ahead of time. And then everybody at the conference can participate in that town hall forum. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We have speakers starting with Paul Hastings, who has a podcast called the Compelled Podcast. And he's going to kick the conference off with Podcasting 101. And we are literally going to talk about everything in between until our final speaker, which is Ozeal, who is a local Houston guy who's going to talk about building a podcast community. So we have how to grow and how to monetize, how to start, how to launch, guest best practices. We're going to have a couple of panel discussions because really the audience that I want to serve with this conference is the new person who's brand new, who doesn't know anything, but also the person who already has a podcast and they go, okay, I've got a podcast now. I love it. I can really see doing something with this in the future, but how do I grow? How do I find more listeners? How do I take it to the next level? How do I monetize this so that it's sustainable? Because I don't know if people know this that are listening, but every aspect is expensive in terms of the technology that we use, getting the proper equipment, the editing, the post-production, like all of that, the hosting services. And then if you do anything additional with audiograms or video or, all of that can be really expensive, and we want to do it well. So how can we not constantly lose money doing this, but how can we maybe get it to pay for itself so that we can then offer the best possible podcast with the resources that we have?
That sounds like 2 full days of just fire hose, right?
Yes. But I tried to build in a lot, I tried to really think through like technical session, not as technical, like a really lively speaker, somebody who's so I really tried to think about the whole thing and tried to build in time for networking and connecting. Like we're going to go off site for lunch because we are having it at a hotel, but across the road are lots of different options. So if you want Mexican food or a salad or a chicken place or a sit down, you can do that. And so I'm letting people go off in smaller groups so that they can network, because I think that's really where the advantage is over doing an online summit. I think there's something really special because we are made as Christians, and people in general, we are made to be in community with one another. And there is something really special that happens when we are in the presence of one another. We'll start talking and it'll take us on a tangent, and you just never know what the Lord can do with that. So I wanted to create space for those things to happen.
I love it. That's really, really important. And you're right. Like you can't always create that within the venue of it. It's the stuff that happens like late at night. Well, people are just hanging in the lounge or whatever. Like it's just perfect. So good.
Exactly, exactly. That's why we're hosting it at the Marriott Spring Hill Suites. And the reason that I decided to do it at a hotel was because if people wanted to linger, there's lots of places around the hotel to gather off and to have conversations. So if they wanted to stay up late, they could do that. And if they wanted to just go to bed, they could go to bed and then wake up early in the morning and meet somebody for breakfast. But I wanted it to be a place because my desire for this is really to build a community of and podcasters, because we're all in different places in our journey. And so for people who are just starting out, I want people to encourage them. And for other people who are already doing the thing, I want them to meet people that are further along than they are. So even within my speaking team, I've got Rob Kirkpatrick coming from Focus on the Family. I know you're in Colorado, so Focus on the Family. He does content planning for them, and he's going to come and teach us content planning, which is amazing. And just speakers who've been inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. I didn't even know there was a Podcast Hall of Fame
Right.
until I started this. And so there's really people at every level. The speakers, the sponsors. I've got amazing sponsors who are coming to the conference as well. And they're bringing just a wealth of knowledge and fun toys for us to play with and new technology. And it's going to be really amazing.
That's awesome. So I have to ask, like, having put on an event myself, I know that this is no small thing. Like, have you done many events before, or like what?
Yeah.
Is that a no?
I know. So it's so funny. The person who's never been to a podcast conference and
Right.
the person who's never hosted an event is the one who's doing it. Yeah. No,
Right.
When I homeschooled my kids, so before I started writing and speaking and podcasting, I spent 20 years homeschooling my kids. And during that time, I had no idea how much God was preparing me for the next season of my life. But one of the things that I did during that time was my son was involved in speech and debate, and he did moot court and mock trial and model United Nations and all of these speech and debate related activities. And he was coaching his brother's junior high model UN team, and he found Model NATO, and he goes, Model NATO, that sounds really cool. It's a collegiate event and there's not one for high schoolers. I would love to participate in a Model NATO. And I said, well, then start one. And I was like, why not? And so I helped him, and that was where I sort of got my feet wet in conference planning. He had events at Rice University and Houston Baptist University and the World Affairs Council. And those events, I really helped him because he was a junior in high school. So I helped him, and that's where I learned a lot. And I think it's just in my natural gifting. So I host a group of women in my home every month of writers, speakers, podcasters, entrepreneurs, dreamers. And I gather them in my home because a lot of times, even though we're so involved in social media, it can be a lonely journey. And so I gather women in my home every month to encourage one another, to teach, to train, to fellowship, to speak into our projects. And so it just was in my natural wheelhouse. I'm a party planner. Like, I love to throw a party. Anybody that knows me, hospitality is my gifting. And so I think God made me for this. When I started stepping out and planning this, I was like, oh, we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do this. But the really cool thing is that because God is the one that gave me this dream. He's the one that gives us the desires of our heart, but He also is our provider. So as I stepped out and started planning and started talking to people, God started opening doors for me that never would have been opened otherwise, if that makes sense. I mean, it's not it's not just me. This is the Lord has done this. The Lord has sparked this conference. And so the glory and the credit, it all goes to him, because in my own power, there's no way I could. If I think about the magnitude, the other day I was like, Lord, this is so much bigger than me. But it is, and it's all bigger than we are. And he wants to give us good gifts, and he's got, purposes for each one of us to walk in. And he wants us to ask him. And when we do, and we step out in faith, not knowing where that road is going to lead, that gives him an opportunity to do what only he can do.
It's funny. I have this like note to like ask you some real logistical questions about how this all came about. But what you just said is what I really want the listener to hear, is that he's been preparing you through other things that you were just kind of naturally doing. He's already gifted you. And then he began to open the doors as you said yes. And I think that's kind of what we shy away from, right? Like, oh, I don't know if this is what I should be doing. So we try it and we realize like, oh, yes, he made me for this. But we don't really know until we start to take some of those leaps of faith. So at least that's what I got from what you just said.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are things that even my one of my last jobs 25 years ago, I found myself using skills that I had learned back then. And I was like, Lord, you've been preparing me for this all the way along. And so, yeah, I think sometimes we think we need to have it all figured out before we take a step. But that's not faith. Faith is believing in what we don't see. And so sometimes it's taking that step and not knowing where that step is going to lead. And I think he only gives us enough light sometimes to just take the next step. Because if we saw the whole picture, we may not step at all, right? But but he wants us to trust him and to hold things loosely and put them before him. And he wants to guide us and he wants to direct us. I mean, that's the desire of his heart. And my life verse is trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your own understanding, right? Because that's what trips us up. But in all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. So that's what he wants for us to do. And it's easier said than done sometimes.
Especially if you're kind of doing this solo and feel already alone in it. Like, what is he going to do if I do this?
Or what if I fail? What if I do it and what if nobody comes? What if everybody thinks this is a bad idea? What if I do the first one and everything goes wrong? Well, he didn't ask me to figure all that out. He just wanted me to trust him. And so as I trusted and I stepped, then I got to see the storehouses of heaven open and he make connections and do things that only he could do.
What would you say has been kind of like the biggest thing that he has surprised you with regard to this conference?
I think probably, making the connection with Focus on the Family, that was huge for me because I have listened to Focus on the Family, their radio shows. I raised my kids on Adventures in Odyssey. And so, they're just a top-notch organization. And when the Lord opened that door, I was just really blown away. And that the sponsors who have come, because really, the sponsors are helping for the conference to even take place. Doing an event in a venue like a hotel is expensive, but I wanted it to be professional. I wanted to make room for conversations. I wanted us all to be in one place. And so that took a lot of resources. And then just today, this morning, I had an email from a guy in Saudi Arabia who has a podcast network who wants to come to the conference. And I'm like, what, Lord? Like, I don't even understand, like somebody from Spain and there's a guy from South Korea who's coming. I'm like, what, God? Like, I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
every day it seems like there's something new that I'm not expecting. I'm actually working on securing some a talent for our Friday night event where we're going to do Christian Podcast Awards. So we're going to do that. And he opened a door. I just kind of threw it out there as like, hey, God, wouldn't this be cool if? And the next thing I know, he's working things behind the scenes. So I can't announce it yet because
Sure.
we haven't, it's not official yet. But it's just, you know, God wants to do more with us in our lives than we can possibly imagine. And he's got such good gifts in store. And if we hold on to things so tight and try to want things to be a certain way, then we squelch the room for the Lord to work in that situation. And so I think just being open handed with it and just saying, this is yours, God. What do you want to do? Like, it's just been a really fun ride.
Have you had any kind of fears or apprehension along the way, just to like normalize that for us a little?
Yeah, I mean, I did. I started to panic, like, what if nobody comes? And what if I sign this contract with this hotel that's really expensive? And then I want to have it videotaped so that we can offer a digital version for the people who want to be here but can't afford to travel here. Because really, for me, it's about giving people the tools that they need and connecting them with a community so that they can do this well. But video, that's really expensive too. And so what if I step out and I do all these things and then nobody shows up and I don't, and then I'm beholden to a contract or, those kind of things really started to like freak me out a little bit. And that's when I'd said earlier that's when I realized this is much bigger than me. And my husband will kill me if I go, $50,000 in debt to host a conference.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be highly disappointing.
Right. So I've tried to really be a good steward of my resources and I've got some speakers that I'm drawing on that are locally, some more regionally, and then some I've got nationally, and it's just all come together. But I think that's where the fear has been is sort of in the unknown. And then just trusting God to he's the one that gave me this idea. So whoever is supposed to be there will be there. And when I can just let go of that fear, then I can just be excited. And every day I'm like, okay, God, what's next? What are we going to do now? And so it's just been a lot of fun.
And I love that energy that can kind of fuel the next step when you start to see, oh yeah, he is faithful. Right. I mean, he didn't have to prove himself to me, but thank goodness that he did, that he showed me that he's here in it doing things that I had no idea he was working on. So it does, I think, fuel us to keep going.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. And I have to say, I don't remember when you started kind of really publicly promoting things, but as I have watched you from afar, I feel like you've just taken advantage of a lot of opportunities that, you've, like you told me earlier, like you're going live on Facebook and you're sharing the speakers with, whoever shows up to listen to that live. And you're just kind of like having your hands in a lot of different places where, if someone's never heard of you or never heard of this brand new conference, like you do kind of have to be out there, selling your wares the whole time. You said 4 months from start to finish, I think.
Yeah.
It's a very short window of time that you're just like promoting. And I think you're doing an excellent job of that. So
thank you so much. I want to tell you something that I haven't even announced this yet, but I will be announcing it very soon. Because we're recording this podcast before it releases. But in January, if you buy a ticket for Spark in January, Brian Dixon, who is a coach and an author and one of the founders of Hope Writers, he is just an amazing guy who's a friend I wanted to have him at Spark, and he's committed somewhere else. But he said, Misty, I will do a webinar for you. And so TikTok is the new thing, right?
Right.
And I've like, Lord, I cannot do another social media channel. Like, I just can't do it. And Brian said, Misty, anybody who buys a ticket for you in January, I will do a private webinar for them and teach them how to what we're doing with TikTok. And so I am super excited about that. And it's just opportunities like that I kind of threw it out there. I didn't know, hey, was this? And then Brian's the one that came back to me with, hey, why don't I do a webinar for you? And I was like, okay. So yeah.
That's really sweet. Like, it could have just been a no, I'm not available.
Right.
But
and there have been no's because,
sure,
it's definitely that with the compressed time frame, a lot of people are booked out much further. And so they won't be able to take part of this inaugural event. But I knew I wanted to start small because I wanted to build a community, and I wanted it to be done with excellence. And so without going beyond what I could handle, I wanted it to be, a decent size event, but I want people to have access to the speakers. I recently went to a very large conference with amazing speakers, but those speakers were off in the green room in between their speaking sessions, or they were gone, and there was no access to them. And for someone who is at my level, I felt like I didn't really learn anything at that particular conference. But if I would have had 15 minutes with one of those speakers who was just further down the road than me, they could have helped me where I'm stuck. But that wasn't an option. And so I don't want a conference where I'm whisking the speaker away. I want them to be in it with us and to encourage people. So
yeah, I love that. That's a great. It's a unique opportunity. As you just said, you don't always get that. And so, yeah, this will be really, really, really cool.
And so, on that note, one of the things that we have an add-on for is people can purchase for $25. They can purchase time with the podcast coaches. So these people who have been doing podcasting much longer than I have and have lots more answers than I do are making themselves available in between the sessions and at different times. And so if somebody is stuck, they can get a one-on-one appointment, and maybe they just don't even know where to begin, or they've got some ideas and they want some clarity and want somebody who's been there, who's started a lot of podcasts and find out what worked and what didn't work. So that's available as well.
Sweet. That's so great. I don't know how you're fitting all that in 2 days.
It's going to be drinking from a fire hose is what it is going to be. But hopefully we'll have fun along the way. And I think that we have to make the most of the time that we have together. And so, it's going to be a lot. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
So kind of in this process, I mean, this dream of a really now worldwide advertised podcast conference, like if you've got people coming from across the ocean,
right?
That's a big deal. Like, so, I mean, what would you say to somebody who's like, oh, I have this dream, but it just feels too big for me, or feels too big for me to do alone? Like, how would you coach that woman?
I would say then you're exactly where you need to be, because because when we depend on the Lord to do the thing that we're trying to do, if we try to do it in our own strength, we're going to fall short every single time, because we are fallen people living in a fallen creation. And when we open our hands and say, Lord, I want to do this thing, but I don't even know how to do this thing, God knows all the things and he has all the resources. So I think that if you're in that position, you're exactly where you need to be, because then you can trust on the Lord to guide you and direct you and to see you through. Because I think we are dangerous when we think, I got this, I know how to do all this. And not that the Lord can't use that too, he can, but I think there's a sweetness when we don't have it all together and we do it afraid, stepping out, and even if we're afraid, when we take that step of faith, I think that's just a beautiful thing to the Lord, and I think that the Lord wants to bless that.
And I feel like too that you're not always going to feel as afraid as you do today.
That's right.
Right? Like
yeah.
it ebbs and flows, but he is there with us as we take those steps. And I feel like I've gotten some really sweet reassurance along the way of his presence with me in the things that I've tried that I was like, I don't know how to do this. So love it. Well, let's talk about the giveaway, the exciting giveaway. So this is so sweet. Misty has offered a free ticket to the Spark conference. I don't know what the current value of that is. What are you selling those tickets at in January?
$197. So almost
Sweet.
a $200. Yeah. So you're on your own for your travel to Houston and your hotel, but your conference will be paid for.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to give this away on Instagram. So this episode is coming out on a Wednesday. You have until this coming Sunday to enter the giveaway on Instagram. And what I need you to do is go to my Instagram, which is MerrittJO, and look for that post about the giveaway. And so I'm going to need you to follow me, follow Misty over at Spark Christian PodCon, and I will link that in the show notes so you don't have to remember it or write it down right now. And then just tag 2 friends who might be interested in, learning more about what it is to podcast, or they've just started a podcast. They might want to learn about the conference as well. So we are spreading the word more nationwide, at least, right? And
Yes.
That $197 ticket might be yours. So you have until Sunday at midnight Eastern to enter that giveaway, and we will let you know who that is. Just going to be a random drawing. So thank you so much, Misty. That is a really, really sweet offer.
Absolutely. I'm excited to offer that.
Yeah. And tell us also, like, where else people can connect with you, maybe even a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah.
How do we find you?
Yeah. So mistyphillip.com is my website, is my main website. And then you can find a link to the Spark website there. You will also find my podcast. I wrote a book this year called The Struggle is Real, but So is God. And that's what helped to frame my podcast, because, we don't want to talk about our struggles, but when we're open and honest about what we've struggled with, people go, I'm not the only one. Because sometimes when we go through a difficult season, it's very isolating and very lonely. And so I wanted people to know that not only are we never alone, because God is always with us, but there are other people who have gone through that very thing. And if God can get them through that tough situation, then he can do that same thing for us. And so that is how my podcast was born, out of the Bible study. And you can find all those things. I'm also online pretty much everywhere as Misty Phillip. So
Awesome. And it's 2 L's?
2 L's and no S.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to add an S.
Yeah, I was somebody was very sweet and put me in their top 10 list of podcast, and they put an S on my name, and I was like, okay, well, I hope they find me.
Right. I have the problem too. Merritt is not an easy name to spell. Oh, okay. So I always kind of want to have you here at the end just think about like who you were before God gave you these dreams, or before you knew that he gave him to you. And where you are today, how has he changed you as you've stepped out in faith and followed this dream and trusted him along the way?
Yeah, so I would say that I didn't even know what I didn't know before I began the journey. And after being at home for a long time as a wife and with my kids, I'd left my corporate job behind. I never thought I would work outside of the home again. And to even start writing and speaking, that was a struggle for me. And that's really when the journey began before this conference and everything unfolded. He's just grown me so much as a person. I think I've become a more interesting person because I have more things to talk about. I was pretty sheltered in my, in my home life, and it has helped me to see God's people in a different way because, having the podcast and hearing people's stories and it's just really, I've seen the Lord more as I've gotten a glimpse into his work in other people. And then I would just say that he's helped me to be courageous as I formed this podcast conference because, I'm a business owner now. I'm an entrepreneur. I went from, writing and speaking, and now I have a conference, and it's not a small undertaking. But he's emboldened me to do that. And so that has been, I think, the neatest thing is just trusting him, not understanding where it's all going to lead with whether my podcast or my writing or my speaking or this podcast conference, all of it, but just trusting him in the process and just growing as a person. And the connections that I've made through this and the people, Merritt, I never would have had the chance to meet you in my everyday life. And through stepping out into this, God has connected me with some of the most amazing people that I would not have had the opportunity to meet in my normal life. And so that's really how it's changed me.
If your dream feels totally out of your league, this was the episode for you. As always, you can find the show notes for this episode on my website at merrittansa.com/podcast/138. That's the episode number. I will provide links there where you can connect with Misty and the Spark Conference, as well as find her book /Bible study, The Struggle is Real, But So is God. So just a few closing thoughts. These are things you might want to process from the interview. In fact, if you're not driving down the road or running on the treadmill, why not grab a journal or a sheet of paper to take some notes and hit pause to process this a little bit. So, number one, Misty said she had no idea how much God was preparing her for what she's doing right now. And I'd add how he'd be growing her gifts along the way. We just kind of can't see that in the moment. I mean, we know when we're growing and learning, but specifically the gifts that he's going to use for something long into the future, we don't really know that. So even though from the outside looking in, one might have looked at Misty and said, oh, she's just a homeschooling mom, there was so much more going on in the background, right? So a little reflection or journaling question for you right here. As you consider your dream, look back on your life and ask yourself what God has brought you through that could be preparation for bringing that dream to life. And maybe just have some moments of gratitude and praise for what he has already done in you. Okay. Takeaway number 2, Misty said, God is the one who gave me this dream, and he's also our provider. She talked about how God opened doors along the way and how, quote, he's done this and that he wants to give us good gifts, especially when those gifts glorify him. And so, of course, he is going to use those things. Here's your reflection and journaling question on number 2. Continue that gratitude list. Make a whole list of how has God miraculously provided for you in the past, and let that be one of the things that reminds you and strengthens your belief, your trust in His faithfulness to provide for you in the future. Okay, finally, takeaway number 3. She talked about how if we saw the whole picture, we may not step forward at all. And all I could think when she said this was how gracious He is to not present us with the whole big picture at the beginning. We don't know where He will lead us. We don't know what He will do with us. We don't see all the steps before we begin to take them. And that is a good thing. Some of us want to control all the things. And so we begin to get wrapped up in anxiety if we can't see it all. But it is a good thing not to see it all, because in that we get to grow in our trust for Him along the way. And isn't that more of what this is all about than really just reaching a finish line, right? That we would grow, that we would learn, that we would trust Him more. So in Misty's words, be open-handed with where He's got you and trust that He's going to have you all along the way. The reflection and journaling question for this one: what might you need to be more open-handed about related to your dream? All right, that's my summary on episode 138 and the first one back for season 7. Don't forget to go enter the giveaway over on Instagram. Even if you don't have a podcast, maybe you know someone who's dreaming of starting one, so tag her in that post. I can think of a handful of you right off the bat who are thinking about doing this. So if you can get yourself to Houston at the end of February for the Spark Conference, I am certain you will not be disappointed. Plus, if you win, you'll get to connect with Misty, which means you will already kind of know someone when you show up at the conference. Oh, and right, she happens to be the founder. All right, good luck with that. We all want to make an impact, right? I mean, what are those dreams about anyway? Well, here's a quick way to do that right now for someone who needs what you just heard. Will you take a screenshot of this episode, tag me at MerrittJO, and share it in your Instagram stories so that together we can get this encouraging message into the earbuds of the women who are ready to fight back fear, trust their identity in Christ, and unleash the dreams He's given them for their lives. It's so simple to do, and they will thank you for your recommendation. Then, before you go, if you were encouraged by today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review of the show over on iTunes so other dreamers just like you can find the podcast. Until next time, I would love to connect with you over on Instagram or in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group on Facebook, where you'll find a community of like-minded women who love Jesus and are in the midst of pursuing the dream He's placed on their hearts. Thank you so much for joining me today. And wherever you are with your God-shaped dreams, may you have the courage to take one step toward their realization today.